the best session, not gonna lie. We are going to be doing some conversation. So if you are an island, you may want to at least be an archipelago and come up with some other islands near you. So we will do some discussion, and if you do have your device and it is fully charged, we will be using the internet a little bit later. But if you want to go no tech, we support you in that decision too. So I'm Sarah. I'm a teaching learning specialist at the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, where we are, as part of Pennsylvania's efforts for bringing more computer science opportunities across the Commonwealth, we have an intergovernment agreement with PE to provide support and professional learning throughout the eastern side of the state.
And I'm Rebecca Smith. I'm a digital media specialist, also who works with Sarah supporting the computer science project in the state. If any of you were in the Crayola session immediately preceding this, I take a lot of that data and put it into visual form. And we will be exploring some of that today. Go ahead. So today we're going to take a look at some of the computer science data, some different sets of data, and draw comparisons in our region. We're going to talk about what the data looks like now and the importance of updating the self-reported data. And we're going to talk about coordinating next steps for increasing local computer science participation in Pennsylvania.
So Rebecca, can you tell us why we're focusing on CS right now?
Aside from it being our job.
Yeah.
Basically, everybody wants computer science. Here we see that parents want computer science. 90% of parents say that they want their child to study computer science, but only 35% of high schools right now teach computer science.
And that's nationally.
Students want computer science. It's among their favorite subjects right after art and design and the performing arts. And there's a big margin between the next favorite subject, English, and computer science. So students like it, they want to take it.
No, we're not knocking the math people, we promise.
And employers need computer science. Nationally, there's 500,000 openings in computing jobs in every industry across every state, and particularly in Pennsylvania. Over time, the computer science jobs are projected to grow at 2 times the rate of all other jobs. So there will be a need right now, but also in the future.
So how are we doing with computer science? And Rebecca and I were kind of talking about this, and we talk about it every day. Not a huge television buff, but my husband quotes this all the time. If you're a fan of Mad Men, how do they sound? It's really low.
Do you want me to?
Sure. It's really short. All he says is, not great, Bob. Oh, here we go, we do speakers.
Our speakers, we just need to get plugged into your laptop.
Oh, it's okay. So we jokingly refer to that all the time, like, how are we doing with computer science? Well, not great, Bob. When we think about how we are, okay, we'll watch it. This will set the tone for us today. Thanks.
There you go.
It's okay. We're not great, Bob. It's cool. It's the same time, Bob. It's great. So how are we doing? We know we're not doing great, but I would like to add, my favorite word in the dictionary is yet. We're not doing great yet. It is a work in progress, and we are working really hard. So what's happening in Pennsylvania? This is data collected from a national survey and reporting mechanism from code.org. That number, the 19,000 number, depending on which data set you're looking at, can actually swing upwards of 21,000 jobs. And when we talk about those open computing jobs, we're not talking just about the highest level Zuckerberg-esque jobs. We're talking about across all levels of education, post-secondary, and all levels of experience. So those are jobs that require some degree of, not degree, but some level of computer science knowledge or engagement experience to fulfill those job requirements. So we're not limiting this data, and we're not limiting our focus to that one little tiny group of students who are really committed to becoming computer scientists with like a capital C and a capital S. Over the past few years at Pennsylvania, like this is one of those glass half full, glass half empty kind of questions or statements. We've consistently ranked in the top of the list for the most open computing jobs. So yay, we've got a lot of opportunities. Boo, we're not filling those opportunities. We know that within our state, we have in the past year put forth more money as a state towards computer science education and professional development and resources than anybody else in the country. Like, we believe on paper, the numbers add up with Governor Wolf's Targeted Advancing Grants Initiative, the Middle Class Task Force. We are literally throwing money and resources at this problem. There are some other things happening. We know that the CSTA standards are up for voluntary adoption. They are being kind of reviewed as we speak. So we are working on things. We're not great, but we're working on things right now. Where we get into some other data is with our PIMS data and some other publicly released and collected data. So this is from our PIMS system. This is the percent of students enrolled in computer science by district. And if we break that down, it shows that we are, as a Commonwealth, reporting that 24.7% of our schools have some type of computer science. When we break that down even further, we're reporting that 2.6% of our students are actually participating in computer science. So looking back at that 20,000-ish number of open jobs, the math doesn't really go together really well. We've got 20,000 open jobs, but we're only supporting about 2% of our students to go after those opportunities and jobs as they graduate. We do know that that data isn't super great. If we dig deeper, we are not supporting the students who really need it the most. Not only our low SES students, but our minority populations. And our statistics align with national statistics about representation in computer science as far as the gender gap goes and those underrepresented groups. So we do have a lot of ground to make up collectively for all of our students, but when we drill down that data even further, we realize that that 2.6% is largely skewed and doesn't represent our students as a collective body.
Like Sarah said, some of our data is a little bit skewed. So if we take down different types of data, over here we have our PIMS data, and over here is a breakdown of active code classrooms broken down by school district. And what we see is that the data doesn't match up. In the red circles on this side here are districts that are reporting any students involved in computer science courses. And on the code.org side, we see that those same districts continually have classrooms that do have active computer science students. So what we're seeing is the data across the board doesn't really line up. When we report our statewide statistics nationally, we are hitting students who are actually participating in computer science. So we're doing a little bit better than we think we are, which is great, Bob.
Great, Bob.
But really, with the data not aligning, we're doing the best with what we have. The computer science PIMS data that says that some schools aren't offering computer science, even though that we know they are, is a catalyst for the work around computer science in Pennsylvania, including the PA Smart Grant funding that just went out, the CS for All PA Summit, and other computer science decisions that are happening are being based off of the data that is not great. And so we use this data for policy conversations, and so accurate data is important because it ensures that the policy conversations are mindful of real barriers or mindful of what's really going on. And it will help PDE focus on what we actually need.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to this map again really quickly to say that, that we're able to take out data from code.org. We are the regional partner for code.org programming and professional learning in Eastern PA. So we do have access to another set of data. And for us internally, being able to look at what is publicly reported by your districts, and then what your teachers are actually getting online and logging, that is an interesting point for us. Now we know that isn't a direct correlation. If you log into the website with your students for Hour of Code and you do a few activities, I would not personally quantify that as computer science programming or an educational pathway. If it's just a few touch points or it's used as an extracurricular activity, I can't quantify how the website is being used. But I do know that code.org specifically as a curriculum and as a package is being used. Code.org is one of many curriculum and professional learning packages that is available across the Commonwealth. But being able to at least compare more data points is helpful for us to have these conversations. Going back to this idea of these policy conversations, Judge Pittman actually, we had a conversation with him and he gave us a real example of this policy conversation. There was at times a small conversation about making computer science like a graduation requirement. There are states across the nation that do that. When that popped up in policy conversation over the past year or two in Pennsylvania, looking at that data, especially when we go back to our subgroups, it was immediately squashed because it was realized that by making that a requirement, that we were putting even more students at a bigger disadvantage. So even though it sounded like a good idea and on paper would make our state look great, if we match that with what's actually happening, there's no magic wand to make sure that we fixed this data to meet a new target for data. So being able to look at that and be true and honest with ourselves about what is happening is very important to help those policy conversations. Having no data is way worse than having data that we're not really proud of. And I think that's a lot of what we're hearing from PDE as far as what's being reported in that CS PIMS data.
And so when we talk about actual policy decisions, we mentioned the PA SMART targeted grants. And here is another map comparison. On the one side we have the schools, again, the whole state of schools reporting in PIMS that they have computer science offerings. And on the other side is a map representing the schools that have targeted grant funding for computer science. And what we see is still just whole swaths where there's just kind of not much happening, but we don't know without the data. And even more so, we still have holes here, where there's some holes, but we know that there's funding and targeted support going to those districts. So again, this is another example of how the data really supports actual action and actual dollars coming into districts.
In real life, PDE was working really hard to get the word out about targeted grants. They were using the PIMS data. They were trying to reach out to those areas that we keep seeing our blank. So one of the questions that they have, and they've been posing really to the public, is what happened? Because if you notice, the holes didn't really go after the funding, even though the funding was developed in large part to help fill those holes. So over the next several months, as this targeted grant cycle continues, that's something that PDE is going to be looking at a lot with support from the LEAs, including ours and all of yours, to say where was that disconnect in communication or the reporting, so that we can continue to support those areas that need it the most. It is anticipated that there will be another cycle of targeted grant funding released for 2020, for 2021. So this data is super crucial. Mm-hmm. Going back to that idea that no data is a way worse situation than data that we're not proud of. Those schools that are reporting that they don't have computer science, they are shining a light on themselves And PDE is recognizing that and trying to make connections, build relationships, and offer support and resources to those districts. But if they don't see districts waving their hands SOS, they don't know to come and support you. So we'd like to actually offer the opportunity for you to look at your own data. Before we do so, I'd like to point out, to mention a few other things. This is not a blame game. We're not upset if you don't have your CS data in there. We do realize that the reporting of CS data is not mandatory in PIMS at this point. So, you know, it's not a must-have, but it's from our perspective at least, it's a want. We would like for it to be reported. We also recognize that it's sometimes is difficult for districts to accurately report. So it may not be a case of not trying, it may be a case of trying but not fully understanding, because there actually isn't a good full definition of what is a CS course in PIMS. And PDE recognizes that and is working to create that and present that. We're hoping to have some more language around that at this year's CS for All PA conference this summer happening at Patton Harrisburg. But if you don't know what it is that you're reporting, we understand, yeah, that could get tricky. So coding it correctly is a barrier for getting this data to be as good as it can be. That being said, we'd love to offer the opportunity for you to look at your data and have some thoughtful conversations with a neighbor. We are, of course, all neighbors, and I believe we're all in it together as far as why we're here. We're here to support our students and provide them the most opportunities as possible. And personally, you know, I'll get up on my soapbox and say there's 20,000 jobs are thousands of opportunities that we want to provide our students. So as you're looking at data and you're having conversations, please be honest, and it's okay to be a little vulnerable. What we hope to do is have some discussion and some exploration of that data. That QR code and that bit.ly link actually link directly to that Tableau, that map interface of the CS data pulled from PIMS. We would love it if you would take some time to zone in on your area. Does that represent what you know is happening in your district and your schools? Is there something that totally looks off? Who else do you think needs to see it? If you've never seen this Tableau or this map, it's okay. You can be honest with yourself, with us, with your neighbors. But now that you have access to it, who are the stakeholders or who are the others in your home schools and districts that should have access and see this data? And then lastly, those questions about like why? What can this data be used for you? And why is it important for you to continue to update, or actually do it for the first time ever, upload that data so that PDE can continue growing its network of support, its menu of options and resources for districts. We'll be happy to come around and help you if you're having difficulty accessing the PIMS website to see that Tableau to see the PIMS data. But we do want to honor that and provide you some time to look at that. So we're going to go into that kind of discussion and that exploration time for the next few minutes, but we will come back all together and kind of share out and look at next steps before we leave. So we have plenty of time, it looks like. We'll come around and help with data if you need it. Now, going back to what I said earlier, is that there isn't actually a definition for computer science courses. So right now, it is by your decision, by your design. What we are hoping to do, especially coming up on this year's CS for All conference, is help craft that. And as we move forward with the goals for the CS standards being used in our schools and certification pathways, actually kind of create a framework for like what this looks like. We have a lot of conversation about what is computer science and what is not, but we know that it gets a little murky when we start talking about STEM. As we move forward and those standards are adopted formally, I think that will definitely help us clean up that and be a benchmark for saying, yes, this course is standards aligned, yes, the objectives are for meeting those skill sets and that knowledge base our students need with computer science. But at this point, it is at your discretion.
So I worked on the map and the data behind it. So in the PIMS course code list, in that kind of volume 2 of the standardized state course codes, what goes into this map is just computer science and computer programming.
Yeah.
So for example, like networking, IT, stuff like that, that's not included here. This is a pretty strict computer science, computer programming definition.
But what we will say
That's why
is
we only reported computer science, because we looked at that. We're doing a lot of Raspberry Pi work with Python and things like that in our STEM courses, but it's not solely focused on computer science.
it's integrated.
The only we reported was our AP computer science course.
So your data feels a little skewed too, because your students are or interacting with and are meeting those standards. I'd also like to build on that as well to say that those the PIMS codes are a little confusing, and one of the concerns that we have with the data is that there may be, for some districts, there may be a misrepresentation with the networks or information technology, because the person reporting that data may not see the course title and understand what's happening in that course. So they may be actually underrepresenting courses because they're tagging them something and it's not being pulled up as computer science.
And then if you're looking at kind of across the state, I don't know which districts this applies to and doesn't. It's kind of hard to keep track of from the PD side, but computer science and all of the IT courses are considered non-core content. So in the PIMS world, they're not required to be submitted. So for example, on the other end of the state from the southeast corner, if you look at Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh school district is not on that map. I would find it hard to believe that they didn't offer computer science with Carnegie Mellon in their backyard.
They're just not reporting it.
They just don't report that course. So that's something else to keep in mind.
That's exactly what we reported.
So going back to that idea of like, it's not mandatory for you to do it, but it's definitely very helpful. There's been conversation, just casual conversation about making it a mandatory report category, but that has not gone anywhere at the time being. So without forcing anyone to do it, we are both locally and at the state level relying on data that we know is inconsistent, that does not paint the most accurate picture for both good and bad. Like I said, I want to stress that having no data is worse than having data that we're not proud of. I think if we're humble and we want to honor where we are and grow, at least owning up to this is what we are doing, but we know we could do more, is helpful than ignoring or removing ourselves from the conversation at all.
Well, and I think PDE's opened that window by letting us take a computer science course and plug that in for one of our already established science courses.
Yeah.
Graduation requirements.
So if you're not familiar with what he's mentioning, Act 86 was enacted a few years ago, and it does allow a computer science course to take the place of and serve it as a math or science credit. So it did add a little kind of oomph to the value of a computer science course, and looking at that data, it helped across the Commonwealth have those conversations, especially with high school guidance counselors and curriculum coordinators, to say this is a valuable thing. It's not just a fun add-on bonus. This could have some real value to our students and obviously our community, thinking about the workforce.
That's how we sold our board on moving in that direction. Those ones that became a requirement, then they bought it.
Yay! Has everybody been able to get into their data? Yeah. No, you need some help? Oh. I'm sorry, was that a yes?
You said it, you just asked a question.
Okay, so you were a positive yes, okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So that's a whole learning class one now. It's all free.
So we're all in the data. Any questions or thought bubbles? Do you need some of those Crayola and markers to draw a representation? Yeah, I mean signature. And obviously, again, no blame, no shame. It just means that you're choosing, whoever's in charge of it or these conversations are happening, they're choosing not to report it. So maybe that's a conversation to have.
I mean, that's a question. You already mentioned, what is computer science, what is it?
Yeah.
Now you do
And we're going to change the name according to this month. from computers to a STEAM class,
Okay.
but would that be considered computer science?
As we mentioned, without having a clear definition, it is hard to decide.
Because we do have a group, I mean, I'm looking through our stuff, we have computer science and STEAM, and we're coming up, and what standards did you mention?
The CSTA standards,
And that's what we're using.
then yeah.
And we came up with like a scope and sequence kind of thing, spreadsheet.
Yeah. That's,
So if we wanted to report it, we just have to tell.
you have to tag it as a, yeah, tell whoever's doing the comes data that that is a computer science course.
So,
You get there, yeah. See, not great, Bob, yet. So, not recording. Okay. Yeah.
We don't have anything, nothing, not.
To report or in recording? Yes. Yeah.
We're at 68.5% audit. We're a very small district, so we had a. And we don't do that anymore.
Conversations that have popped up, and we did mention those PA Smart targeted advancing grants. I would like to revisit that because I think there were a few questions. Are we aware? If you received a PA Smart targeted grant, will you just give a little wave?
we
So-
did actually, now that I did a little research.
Yay! So, and that's the thing. So your district may have received funding and you may not know about it if you weren't the person who submitted it. But those people that raised their hands, before you leave, you may want to just pick their brains about what they submitted for and what they're working towards. As I mentioned, those PA Smart targeted grants were one of the results out of Governor Wolf's middle class task force, and this big picture, lofty and exciting goal to say what would make our Commonwealth better for all of our citizens, what would be helpful. And those conversations kind of trickle down and boil down to, well, we've got a bunch of open jobs. What can we do about those open jobs? Well, I guess we could be trying to offer more computer science. So that grant money, the Targeted Advancing Grants was just released to the districts that applied. Nearly every single district that applied received grant funding. The parameters for its use and the application were meant to be as easy and as welcoming as possible. As I mentioned, we are hoping that in this year's budget, that extra chunk or that next phase, or what's being called phase 2, is approved. So even if you just do really quick and save it in your bookmarks, if you Google PA Smart grant, that'll take you to the specific web pages within the governor's office's website that will show you the districts that received it, gives you that kind of visualization, but discusses what the uses for those grants are for. We're really excited. If you are a targeted grant recipient, please talk to your LEAs, talk to your IUs. They are happy to support you and help you make sure that you're making the most out of those dollars to put some programming in place in the next year to build up that data. Yeah.
Do we know how phase 2 is going to change or what some of the limitations on phase 2 are going to be yet?
Honestly, no. And I can speak personally that we've been in those conversations. Our organization, as part of the rollout for phase 1, and we haven't had a lot of conversation about what phase 2 is like yet. Obviously, we are waiting to see if that budget is approved this summer, and looking at the data from phase 1 to see what the dollars are getting spent on, what the scope is of that work. So right now, hoping that happens. We're expecting it. The first round received overwhelmingly bipartisan support, but.
One suggestion for round 2 would be to change the limitation on travel costs for rural districts that are distances away from Harrisburg. We're in the southwestern quarter, and it's going to cost us more than 5 to get our people up to the number of trainings that we need to get them to.
So if you're looking at that, and this is a sidebar if you're not in the targeted grant, looking at that, what you would need that for is just the boot camp. Because like the 712 certification boot camp structure is the only, and I know it's still a barrier, but that's the only part of the programming that is required to be at Patton-Harrisburg. The 712, the other pathways, they are doing local, both at the West Patton, Central and East. But I hear you, and I'm happy to pass that along to those that make those
So
decisions.
we need the boot camp for where I'm at, so that's why.
That's something that you're looking into.
We're
Okay.
going to send a student to Patton, Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and the boot camp is limited by just, you can only send 2 teachers anyways. So that, that's a limit, but yeah, I'm happy to pass that along. We understand being a centralized location doesn't always mean centralized for people. Any other, I guess, questions or ideas coming out of how that grant money is tied to data and goals for that? We'd love for these conversations to continue. I would say, if you're not sure how to update that PIMS data, or you want to talk to the experts about how to code that, or if that is at a computer science course, we know that there is a PIMS help desk right upstairs happening all day long today and tomorrow. So go ask the experts themselves. Those are the same great folks who run the weekly Q&A webinars through the website. And then on the website as well, you can actually submit like a help ticket if you have a specific question. If you want to reach out and say, we're looking at this course, we're not sure if it is a computer science course, could you give us some feedback? They can do it that way as well. We are not PIMS experts. We're the people who are using that data, but we want to make sure that you can get in touch with those who can support you in updating that data. And then our last goal, and maybe this goes into some of the conversation that you're having with your neighbors before you leave, is what are your next steps? We are hearing from pockets of conversation that computer science is becoming a priority at your district, but having a pathway or knowing what that course, the course of action looks like can be kind of scary. So maybe that's a conversation of looking at that data. How can you use, who else needs to see it? What is that conversation? How do we support our students in our schools and in our communities to fill those 20,000 jobs? Talk to your LEAs, your IUs about resources and curriculum tools such as Google CS First, Code.org, Apple Swift. Even if you're not a targeted grant recipient, there are a lot of free, standards aligned, best practice reviewed, professional learning and curriculum programs and opportunities available. Just need to know that they're there. So if you have questions or you'd just like to discuss them, I would invite you to reach out to your LEAs about what might be available. And if you haven't done so already and you want to save the date, the PACS for All Summit is scheduled for this summer. It will be at Patton-Harrisburg again. The first one was held last year, and it was a great experience. Ruth Barber was there discussing the value of CS data and CS in our schools. And it is directed to a cross-stakeholder group. So last year we had a wonderful cross-stakeholder selection of teachers, administrators, our school counselors were there, computer science experts, our higher ed partners were there, so that we could have these conversations about what it is that we need to do collectively to make sure that everything is happening to get our students to the next level, pathways into their careers and occupations, pathways into education, but just really providing as many opportunities as we can for all of our students and meeting all of our goals for supporting our students and their diverse needs. With that, we'd love to just throw it back out to conversation and discussion. Anything for the good of the group?
Yeah, so one resource that I would suggest is Carnegie Mellon's CS for All program, their computer science application guides. It's all free software. It's an online tool that your kids can use. And if you sign up to Carnegie Mellon for a pilot account, they'll give you all the student accounts that you want, and it's free service. So that's one of the top computer science schools in the country. So they're willing to partner with high schools to try and push that forward to attract their next student population coming in.
And they are a big partner with this work, and we'll be rolling out some extra stuff in the coming months with the CS for All conference as well. Along those same lines, looking into next year, PDE is looking to support the use of the script tool. If you've been familiar with like the Carnegie STEM pathway, have we heard of that? The script tool is specifically for CS. And what it does is it allows you to kind of take the pulse, see what's happening in your district, and support you in making a plan, both a short-term and a long-term plan. So PDE is looking at ways to roll that out for no fee through a statement of work support across the Commonwealth in the upcoming year. So maybe doodle that down or reach out to your IU about that. But we know that several of us have become trained providers of script. PDE is just working on a plan to maximize the reach so that districts that are interested and want that tool and want that experience can have access to it across the state. Any other further good of the group or just general takeaways from today? All right. Again, we're happy to continue with conversation. I can plug back up that if you need that link again. But the time is yours to either spend looking at your data, talking to a neighbor, especially if maybe you didn't. If you're not sure if your district went after those targeted grant funds and you want to speak to someone who did. I don't want to put them on the spot, but there are some PDE folk in the room who may be able to also answer some questions or provide some input as well. But we're really grateful for the opportunity to share with you why we are evaluating data and how we're using it. But we'd love to be a part of your conversation too. Rebecca?
Thanks, ditto.